In a quiet southern town, a 78-year-old black woman is attacked without warning by arrogant racist men. They think she's powerless, just another easy target. But their mistake is about to echo far beyond the street, because they have no idea who she used to be and who still answers her call. The old man's voice dripped with contempt as he shoved the cane from her hand. "Get out of here, Granny. We don't want your kind around." The summer sun scorched the cracked sidewalks of McAllister Lane, a sleepy town stuck decades behind the rest of the world. Dust curled at the edges of battered pickup trucks. A few passers-by lingered near storefronts, pretending not to notice what was happening. Silence wasn't neutrality here. It was allegiance. Evelyn Carter stood firm. Her silver hair caught the light like a crown. She wore a simple blue dress, worn but clean, and old black combat boots, relics from a life most people thought she couldn't possibly have lived. Her hands were steady, but her dark eyes blazed. 3 men, all thick with beer and bravado, circled her. Their truck idled nearby, a Confederate flag flapping on the antenna. The tallest of them, a man named Roy Tucker, radiated the kind of cruel arrogance bred from generations of unpunished hate. "You deaf too, old lady?" Roy barked, stepping closer. "Ain't you got a home to rot in?" Evelyn didn't flinch, didn't beg, didn't shrink. Instead, she bent down calmly, retrieved her cane, and wiped the dust from its silver handle, an eagle's head worn smooth from decades of use. A gift from a president long forgotten by men like these. One of the others, skinny, twitchy, snatched at her purse. The leather strap tore. A handful of medals spilled onto the ground. For a heartbeat, the street held its breath. Bronze stars, purple hearts, symbols the town claimed to honor, now scattered like garbage at their feet. Roy sneered. He lifted a dusty boot and stomped down on the nearest medal. Metal crunched under his heel. Somewhere across the street, a mother gasped. A teenage boy fumbled for his phone, but at a glare from Roy froze. Evelyn straightened, slow and deliberate. "You boys are real brave," she said, voice low, steady as thunder building on the horizon. Then she smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You ought to pray," she said softly. "I don't make a phone call." Roy laughed, a sharp, ugly bark. "Who you gonna call, Granny? The nursing home?" Evelyn's fingers brushed the thick silver ring on her right hand. She turned it once. A silent signal, older than their hate, older than their ignorance. The skin around her eyes tightened, not from fear, from memory, from something rising that had been sleeping too long. They thought she was a helpless old woman. The voice belonged to no one in particular. It was the town itself whispering, shivering, sensing the shift. They didn't know. She led the deadliest squad the army ever saw. Across the cracked concrete, the winds shifted. Somewhere far away, phones started buzzing. Old radios flickered to life. Motorcycle engines rumbled like awakening giants. And Evelyn Carter stood there, smiling like the war never ended. Evelyn Carter's boots scraped against the dusty sidewalk. As she turned away from the stunned, hateful men behind her, she didn't rush, she didn't run. She walked with the slow, deliberate calm of someone who had survived worse than insults and bruises. The hot afternoon air clung to her skin as she made her way back toward the edge of town. McAllister Lane blurred behind her. The blinking neon sign of Rick's Bar, the boarded-up library, the cracked statues in the town square claiming to honor freedom, but built on selective memory. No one offered help. No one dared. By the time she reached the chipped fence of her small house, the ache had crept deep into her bones, not from age, but from the weight of knowing what had to come next. She pushed open the creaking gate and stepped onto her porch, the boards sagging under her boots. Inside, the house was a museum of a forgotten life. Medals, flags, photographs of soldiers standing shoulder to shoulder, black, white, Latino, Native, smiling in desert sands and frozen forests, men and women who had bled together, wept together, family by fire, family by oath. Evelyn's hand lingered on a framed photo on the mantel, a younger version of herself, back straight, jaw set, surrounded by a ragtag squad of soldiers, their uniforms muddy and torn, but their eyes sharp, alive. She could still hear the laughter, the old radio songs, the whispered promises. "Always got your six, Evie. Call us and we ride." Her fingers brushed the dusty glass. It was time. With the precision that never left her, Evelyn moved to the old wooden desk by the window. She unlocked the bottom drawer with a small brass key she wore around her neck. Inside lay a battered, military-issue sat phone, the kind few civilians ever touched. Evelyn lifted it carefully, as if cradling a living thing. The device was ancient, the plastic yellowed, but it blinked green when she flipped the switch. Alive. She thumbed through the contacts, each one labeled with a code name. Ghost, Steel, Angel, Wolf. Names that had once made enemies flinch in the dark. Evelyn scrolled to the bottom and tapped a single button labeled Family. No words, no greetings, just a coded ping, a heartbeat across time and miles. She set the phone down on the desk and waited. Not a long wait. Within minutes, the old landline on the kitchen counter began to ring. Evelyn answered it on the second. Buzz! A deep, gravelly voice spoke on the other end. Evie? Evelyn smiled, a real one this time. I'm calling in our promise, she said simply. The voice was silent for a moment. Then came the sound of engines revving in the background. Understood. You stay alive till we get there. The line went dead. Evelyn set the receiver back in its cradle and leaned against the counter. Her heart beat slow, steady. The wheels were turning now. Old debts, old oaths, old warriors, all waking up, out beyond the town limits, in the dying. Light of the day, dust clouds began to rise. The kind of dust you didn't want to see coming. The kind that carried men and women trained not to hesitate. She didn't have to wonder if they would come. She knew. The family she chose, the family that war had welded together, was already on the move. The house creaked in the evening heat, old wood settling like tired bones. Evelyn sat in her favorite chair by the window, watching the sun dip low behind the crooked roofs of McAllister Lane. Her fingers tapped a slow rhythm against the armrest, not impatience, but calculation. She knew how this worked. Once the call went out, it was only a matter of time. Across the country, unseen by the sleepy town, gears were grinding to life. In Atlanta, Thomas "Ghost" Jefferson closed the garage door of his auto shop with a loud clang. His mechanic's jumpsuit clung to his thick frame, grease smudging the sleeves, but his hands were still fast, still deadly. He wiped the sweat from his forehead, glanced at his phone, and froze. One ping. No words. Just a memory. Without hesitation, he peeled off the jumpsuit, revealing a scarred body underneath, a map of battles no civilian could imagine. He tossed a duffel bag into the trunk of a battered Dodge Charger and climbed inside. As the engine roared to life, Ghost grinned grimly. "Been too damn long, Evie," he muttered. In Albuquerque, Rosa Angel Martinez was stacking books at the back of a tiny second-hand store. She wore glasses now, her black hair streaked with silver, but her back was as straight as ever. When her old sat phone vibrated in her purse, Rosa didn't even blink. She closed the store, flipped the "closed" sign, and locked the door behind her. Inside her car, she reached under the seat and pulled out a worn military rucksack, packed and ready since the day she retired. She kissed the silver cross around her neck once, then set her GPS to McAllister Lane. In Detroit, Michael Steele O'Connor sat in a dim bar nursing a soda, the faded tattoos on his forearms half hidden under a flannel shirt. His drinking days were long behind him. The bartender, A wiry kid with too much attitude smirked. "You old dudes still think you're tough?" Steele didn't answer. He just looked at his phone, saw the ping, and dropped a few bills on the counter. As he walked out the door, he whistled the old tune they used to hum before a mission. Low, sharp, dangerous. Trouble was coming. And for once, he welcomed it. Back in McAllister Lane, Evelyn brewed tea as if she had all the time in the world. She knew her squad. She knew their hearts. They would come as surely as night followed day. As she stirred honey into her mug, she glanced at the kitchen wall, at a faded map of the world marked with thumbtacks and red string. Each tack a memory, each string a blood tie. The town didn't know it yet, but the wolves were already at their door. Night thickened around McAllister Lane, wrapping the crumbling houses in shadows. Streetlights flickered weakly, buzzing like tired insects. The town had always preferred its darkness. Darkness kept things hidden, kept people silent. But tonight, something ancient stirred beneath the silence. Evelyn stepped onto her porch, the mug of tea warm between her hands. She could feel it in her bones, a pressure shift, like the air before a hurricane. She sat in her old rocking chair and waited. Patience was a weapon too. Far down the empty highway leading into town, a set of headlights pierced the gloom, then another and another, engines low and steady, no roaring bravado, no flashing horns, just a steady, relentless advance. Old soldiers didn't announce themselves. They arrived. Roy Tucker stumbled out of Rick's bar, laughing too loud, clutching a beer bottle. The streets were his kingdom. The night was his armor. He didn't notice the change in the air. He didn't see the glint of steel in the eyes of passing strangers. He didn't hear the low, deliberate footsteps moving in sync across cracked asphalt. In his mind, the town still belonged to men like him, but the ground under his boots had already shifted. At a gas station near the town's edge, Ghost filled up his Charger. He nodded once at Angel as she pulled up beside him, her truck packed and humming. Steele arrived next, stepping out of his battered van and stretching like an old lion waking from a long nap. No greetings, no reunions, only nods, only readiness. Angel pulled a small photograph from her dashboard, an old shot of Evelyn grinning in her uniform, and slid it into her jacket pocket. She made the call. She said quietly, "That's all that matters." Steele cracked his knuckles. "Then we finish it." Ghost's eyes gleamed in the dark. "Family don't ask why." They climbed into their vehicles and rolled toward town, a silent vanguard. At Evelyn's house, the porch light burned like a lone sentinel. She didn't rise when the first car rumbled into view. She didn't stir when doors slammed shut. She simply watched as the old faces emerged from the shadows. Ghost, Angel, Steele, and more still arriving, shadows converging under the dying stars. Ghost climbed the steps first. He knelt at Evelyn's feet, one hand pressed over his heart. "Mom," he said simply. Angel saluted sharp and clean despite the years. Steele offered a battered, familiar grin. Evelyn set her mug down and stood. No speeches, no fanfare, only the fierce, unbreakable bond of warriors. She swept her gaze over them, pride radiating from every line of her face. "They hurt family," she said quietly. A growl of agreement rumbled through the assembled veterans. "They think we're old," Evelyn said, her voice rising. "They think we're done. They think we forgot who we are." She stepped forward, the cane forgotten, the general reawakened. "Well, I remember," she said, fire flashing in her eyes. "And now." So will the heavy wooden door creaked as Evelyn ushered her squad inside. The house, once silent and still, now buzzed with an invisible current, like the first static crackle before a storm. Ghost dropped a duffel bag onto the floor with a loud thud. Inside, equipment shifted, radios, cameras, devices that didn't exist to civilians. Angel hung her jacket on a chair, immediately scanning the room's corners, her sharp eyes cataloguing entrances and exits by pure muscle memory. Steele moved straight to the kitchen window, pulling aside the curtain an inch with a thick, calloused finger. Old instincts never died. They just slept, and tonight they were wide awake. Evelyn stood in the center of them, radiating calm. She didn't have to bark orders. These were not new recruits. They were family, and family knew when it was time to listen. The dining table groaned under the weight of hastily gathered supplies, maps, dusty town records, a laptop booting up with a slow wheeze. Evelyn unfolded a crumpled blueprint of McAllister Lane and pinned it flat with an empty mug. Steele leaned over it, whistling low. "Town's smaller than I remember," he muttered. Evelyn tapped a faded spot on the map. "Their stronghold," she said. The mark was over Rick's bar, not just a watering hole, but a den for the men who ruled the town through fear, silence, and whispered threats. Angel crossed her arms. "That's where they recruit, where they plan. It's their safe house." "Not for long," Ghost said, cracking his knuckles. Evelyn's gaze swept over her squad. "We are not here to brawl in the streets," she said, voice firm. "We are not here for fists or fury. We are here to expose them." She tapped the table for emphasis. "Everything on record, everything on tape. No hiding, no deniability." Steele smirked. "Public execution. Not with bullets, with truth." Angel pulled a slim device from her backpack, a body camera disguised as a button. "We record everything. We stream if needed." Ghost unzipped his duffel and pulled out a battered drone, setting it gently on the table like a sleeping hawk. Eyes. "In the sky. Nobody sneaks up on us." Evelyn nodded once. "Good. We build the case, we expose the infection, and we make sure there's no bandage big enough to cover it up." Outside, the cicadas screamed into the night. Somewhere in town, a dog barked once, sharply, then fell silent. The enemy didn't even know the noose was already tightening. Steele flipped open a town directory scavenged from the local library, jabbed a thick finger at several names. Tucker, Mason, Blevins, all tied to the town council, the police chief, even the zoning board. Ghost raised an eyebrow. "So they don't just run the bar, they run the whole damn show." Angel's voice was sharp. "And they think nobody's watching." Evelyn's smile was thin, cold. "They're about to find out otherwise." She walked over to the old oak cabinet near the fireplace and retrieved a dusty, battered file. It had no markings, just a red ribbon tied tight around yellowing papers. Every time they denied a permit to a black-owned business, every time a protest mysteriously got shut down, every arrest that disappeared before hitting court. She tossed the file onto the table, a ghost of history, built page by page. Ghost thumbed through it, whistling again. "This is gold," he said. "No, this is napalm." The plan unfurled like an old flag, stitched together by experience and fury. Phase 1, surveillance. Phase 2, gathering allies inside town, the quiet ones who had long waited for a spark. Phase 3, deliver everything to the state and federal authorities, but not before broadcasting it across every platform possible. "They can silence a protester," Angel said. "They can't silence 100,000 views on a video. And they sure as hell can't shut down live evidence," Steele added. Evelyn's eyes gleamed. "Justice with witnesses. Justice they can't edit." Hours slipped by as the squad prepared, maps marked, schedules memorized, roles assigned. Steele would handle physical security, patrols, watching their backs, ensuring no one disappeared quietly into the night. Ghost would manage the drone and external surveillance. Angel would document every second, upload backup copies to cloud drives. Hidden behind layers of encryption, Evelyn, she would be the bait, the symbol, the rallying cry. She was ready. Near dawn, they gathered one last time on the porch, breathing the heavy summer air. The first light stained the horizon with blood-red streaks, and McAllister Lane slept on. unaware that the walls were crumbling. Steele cracked his neck. "You know they'll fight dirty," he said. Ghost chuckled without humor. "Wouldn't respect 'em if they didn't." Angel adjusted her jacket, her face carved from stone. "They'll underestimate us," she said. "They always do." Evelyn leaned on her cane, looking out over the town. Her voice was quiet but carved from iron. "And that," she said, "is why they'll lose." In Rick's bar, Roy Tucker nursed a hangover with cheap whiskey, laughing about the stupid old woman he'd shoved around the day before. His buddies roared with him, slapping the bar, hooting like they were kings of the earth. None of them noticed the tiny drone hovering far above. None of them knew their words were being recorded, their sneers captured pixel by pixel, moment by moment, and none of them could imagine that the wolves were already circling. And this time, the sheep had teeth. By mid-morning, McAllister Lane would wake up to more than gossip. They would wake to a reckoning, and Evelyn Carter, once dismissed, once silenced, once underestimated, would be the first sound they heard when the world came knocking. At the center of McAllister Lane, the heart of the storm began to beat. Morning crept into McAllister Lane like a guilty secret. The town blinked in the new day's light, unaware that its sins were no longer whispered rumors hidden in back rooms. Today, they were being recorded. Today, eyes they couldn't intimidate were everywhere. Evelyn sipped her tea on the porch, watching a pair of patrol cars lazily cruise by. The officers inside barely spared her a glance, just a sneer, a muttered comment behind rolled-up windows. Standard procedure for people like her. But this time, Steele crouched unseen behind a rusted mailbox across the street, the small lens of a camcorder capturing every second, everything they thought invisible, every smirk, every whispered slur, now existed in digital permanence. Angel moved through the town like a ghost, disguised as a tourist, with a DSLR camera slung around her neck. She snapped photos of the bar, the police station, the town hall, each a rotten tooth in McAllister Lane's forced smile. Inside Rick's bar, Ghost sat at a corner table nursing a bad cup of coffee. The regulars barely noticed him. To them, he was just another broken man passing through, but Ghost's jacket hid a wire, and every drunken brag, every slurred confession fed directly into a recorder. At the next table over, Roy Tucker held court, his voice oily with pride. "Towns. Ours," Roy boasted to a pair of newcomers. "Always has been, always will be. Cops, council, judges, we own 'em all." Ghost stirred his coffee slowly, hiding a cold smile. "Keep talking, fool." By noon, Evelyn decided it was time to stir the hornet's nest. She left her porch and walked into town, her back straight, cane tapping a steady rhythm against the cracked sidewalk. She wore her medals today, pinned proudly across her chest, a deliberate provocation, a battle standard. People stopped and stared. Mothers pulled their children closer. Old men spat into the dirt. Evelyn met every gaze without blinking. At the grocery store, the cashier's hands trembled slightly as she rang up Evelyn's items. At the diner, the waitress accidentally spilled water across Evelyn's table, then offered no apology. At the courthouse steps, a deputy leaned against a pillar, tossing a coin in one hand. "You're awful proud for someone who don't belong here," he muttered as she passed. Steele, perched unseen on a rooftop across the street, caught every word on tape. Angel, posing as a tourist, captured the sneer. On her high-definition camera, Ghost, tailing 2 blocks behind, streamed the scene to encrypted cloud storage. Everything they did, every insult, every humiliation, was now a weapon being sharpened. Inside Rick's bar, Roy was already drunk. By mid-afternoon, he and his crew roared with laughter as they recounted yesterday's lesson to the old woman. Outside, Evelyn paused near the window, pretending to adjust her purse. From inside, she heard it. "She'll learn her place, or we'll put her in it." Another gem for the archive, another nail for their coffins. She moved on, expression unreadable. By evening, the squad regrouped at Evelyn's house. Maps were spread, files opened, footage reviewed. The screen flickered with grainy clips of Roy bragging, deputies sneering, store owners sneaking glances before short-changing customers with brown skin. Every clip, every photograph, every document. Another weight. Against the rotting pillars holding McAllister Lane together, Angel chewed the end of a pencil, her face dark with anger. "They've been doing this for decades," she said. "And nobody said a damn thing." Steele nodded grimly, "because anyone who tried disappeared." Evelyn stood by the window, staring out into the thickening dark. They thought if they made people scared enough, tired enough, they'd win forever. She turned back to the squad, her voice steel-wrapped velvet. But forever ends now. Phase 1 was complete. They had evidence. They had names. They had faces. Now came the hard part, turning evidence into action, because evidence alone didn't topple corrupt empires. You needed light. You needed noise. You needed outrage loud enough to shake the walls. That night, Evelyn crafted a message. Simple. Direct. A ticking bomb disguised as a whisper. She typed it carefully into a newly created account on every platform imaginable. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, even old message boards forgotten by most. The message contained no threats, no accusations, just a simple statement. McAllister Lane's hidden truth is coming to light. You'll see their faces, you'll hear their words, you'll know what they've built and what it cost. Watch this space. Attached was a blurred teaser image, a white hand crushing a black veteran's medal underfoot. No context, no names, just enough to spark curiosity, just enough to make the enemy nervous. Within hours, the post began to spread. Small at first, a trickle. Locals, nosy and paranoid, whispered about it at gas stations and barbershops. By midnight, regional activists had started sharing it. By morning, journalists sniffing for blood would be digging for more. At Rick's bar, Roy's phone buzzed furiously as he downed another beer. He squinted at the screen, cursing under his breath. What the hell is this? At the police station, Chief Wallace, red-faced and sweating, barked at his deputies to get ahead of it, though none of them had any idea how. At the town hall, council members screamed into phones, demanding someone find out who was behind. But it was already too late. The fire had been lit, and Evelyn Carter's squad held the gasoline. Back at her house, Evelyn leaned back in her chair, her body tired but her spirit blazing. She sipped her tea slowly, savoring the taste of the coming storm. Steele cleaned a handgun quietly at the table. Not because they intended to use it, but because he believed in being ready. Ghost tapped away at a laptop, cross-referencing the town's dirty contracts and payments. Angel double-checked the backup footage, uploading another round to a separate hidden server. They moved like gears in a clock, each one essential, each one locked in perfect rhythm. No speeches, no grandstanding, only the work. The patient, brutal work of justice. When the knock came, at the door it was soft, 3 taps. Evelyn opened it without fear. Outside stood a young black woman, maybe 25, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her hands trembling slightly. "I saw the post," the woman said in a rush. "My uncle. They did this to him too, years ago. I still have his files. His tapes," her voice broke, but nobody ever listened. Evelyn smiled. Not kindly, not pitying, a warrior's smile, a survivor's smile. "They're listening now," Evelyn said. She stepped aside. "Come in." The young woman crossed the threshold, and the movement began. Morning in McAllister Lane arrived under siege. At first, the town tried to pretend. Shopkeepers opened stores. Children rode bicycles down cracked sidewalks. Old men gathered at the diner to complain about the heat, but a strange current ran under everything now, a tension so thick it curled at the edges of every conversation. Everyone had seen the post, and nobody knew who was behind it. At Rick's bar, Roy Tucker slammed, his fist onto the counter hard enough to rattle the bottles. His buddies, Mason, Blevins, and a few others, clustered around him, red-faced and loud. "This is a setup," Roy snarled. "Some damn outsider stirring up trouble." Mason nodded, but his eyes flicked nervously toward the window. He'd seen the comments online. He'd seen old secrets dredged up like corpses in shallow graves. "Maybe it blows over," Blevins muttered, though his voice held no conviction. Roy grabbed him by the collar, hauling him close. "It blows over," he hissed, "when we make it blow over." Across the street, parked innocuously in an old station wagon, Angel filmed the whole encounter with a long-lens camera. Steele, seated behind the wheel, chuckled low under his breath. "Yup," he said. "They're cracking." Inside Evelyn's home, the mood was anything but casual. The living room had transformed into a command center. Laptops buzzed. Maps layered with sticky notes covered the walls. Coffee brewed non-stop. The young woman who had knocked on their door, Jasmine, she said her name was, sat at the kitchen table, nervously tapping her fingers against a thick folder. "My uncle," she said quietly, "owned a little gas station. They fined him into the ground. Said he broke zoning laws that didn't even exist." She swallowed hard. "Then, one night the place burned down. No investigation, no insurance, nothing." Evelyn listened without interrupting, her hands folded in her lap, her gaze steady. Ghost recorded every word, filing it away with the growing mountain of evidence. When Jasmine finished, Evelyn reached out and placed a hand gently over hers. "You're not alone anymore," Evelyn said. Jasmine's eyes filled with tears she quickly wiped away. By noon, 3 more people had come to the house. An older man with a limp who'd lost his farm. A single mother whose application for housing aid had been mysteriously misplaced. A teenage boy expelled from school on trumped-up charges because of a fight he didn't start. Each story added a brick to the wall Evelyn and her squad were building, a wall too strong for the town's lies to tear down. Meanwhile, inside the town hall, panic spread like wildfire. Mayor Henderson, fat, red-faced and sweating through his shirt, barked into a speakerphone. "I don't care what you have to do," he shouted. "Find out who's behind this and shut it down." His staffers flinched. One of them, a young woman with a hidden voice recorder clipped to her blouse, sat very still, recording every word. Later that night, that recording would be sent to Evelyn's team. The rot was eating itself now, and Evelyn was just giving it a little push. In the afternoon heat, Evelyn led a silent walk through the town. No signs, no slogans, just presence. She and Jasmine walked side by side, followed by Ghost, Angel, and Steele a few paces behind. Others joined quietly, the single mother, the farmer, the teenage boy. 10 people, then 20, then 50. No chants, no confrontations, just a tide. Slow, steady, unstoppable. People stared from storefronts and porches. Some spat, others quickly looked away. Roy stood outside Rick's bar, arms folded, jaw clenched so hard the veins stood out on his neck. "Go back to where you belong," he shouted. His voice cracked against the wall of silence. Nobody answered. Nobody needed to. The march rolled past him like he wasn't even there. Steele kept his eyes moving, scanning the rooftops, the alleys, the parked cars. He knew fear made animals unpredictable, and these men were scared enough to do something stupid. Sure. Enough. 2 blocks later, a battered pickup truck roared toward them, engine screaming. Steele reacted before the others even registered the sound. He stepped into the street, broad shoulders squared, one hand casually resting on his hip. The truck skidded to a halt, inches from him. The driver, a pimpled young man with hate in his eyes, revved the engine, trying to intimidate. Steele didn't flinch, didn't move. Instead, Angel stepped out from the crowd and calmly lifted her camera, the lens aimed directly at the driver's face. The young man hesitated, glanced around, realized dozens of phones were pointed at him now. Cursed, slammed the truck into reverse and peeled away in a cloud of dust. Steele walked back to Evelyn's side without a word. The march continued. At sunset, the silent tide circled the town square and returned to Evelyn's porch. No speeches, no announcements, just a message carved into the fabric of the town. We are here. We are watching. We are not afraid. Inside, Evelyn collapsed into her chair, her body aching but her spirit burning. Steele sank heavily onto the couch. Ghost pulled up surveillance feeds. Angel sorted through new footage. Jasmine sat on the floor, her back against the wall, a blanket around her shoulders. The house buzzed with quiet energy, the kind that came before battles, before revolutions. As darkness fell, Evelyn looked out the window at the town beyond. She thought of the young soldiers she had trained once, scared but fierce, broken but unbowed. She thought of promises made on dusty battlefields, of oaths sworn in blood and silence. We leave no one behind. She touched the silver ring on her hand, the old signal to call them home. And silently, she whispered a prayer, not for mercy, but for strength, because she knew tomorrow would not be silent. Tomorrow, the enemy would strike back, and she needed to be ready. Night fell like a heavy curtain over McAllister Lane. The crickets sang their morning song. The cicadas droned low in the blackness. A sticky, wet heat pressed against the earth, making it hard to breathe. But Evelyn Carter breathed easily. She sat in her rocker on the porch, the old wood creaking beneath her as she gently swayed back and forth. The silver moon reflected off the medals pinned to her chest. Inside the house, her squad prepared. Steele sat by the door with a small, discreet baton tucked up his sleeve. Ghost checked the perimeter feeds one last time, the drone circling silently above. Angel double-checked their live stream connections. Tonight, they weren't just waiting. Tonight, they were ready. At Rick's bar, Roy Tucker slammed his third whiskey onto the counter, ignoring the glass shattering on the floor. "They're making us look weak," he shouted. Mason grunted, arms folded. "You're the one who picked the fight, Roy." Roy rounded on him, eyes wild. "They're filming us, mocking us, making us look like fools, in front of the whole damn country." He wasn't wrong. The social media post had exploded. Journalists were sniffing around. Civil rights groups were sharing Evelyn's teaser image with captions like, "Justice in McAllister Lane." Their secrets are about to surface. And Roy? Roy was drowning in a rage he couldn't articulate. "They think they can come into our town and make us afraid," he spat. "We'll show 'em fear." He gathered a few men, the meanest, drunkest, most broken he could find, and whispered, "The plan." That night, under the thin excuse of darkness, they loaded up 2 trucks with bats, chains, and malice. They were going hunting. Steele saw the trucks coming from 2 miles away. Ghost's drone feed showed them clearly. 2 rusted monsters, barreling down the road, headlights off, loaded with too many passengers. He tapped his earpiece once. "They're coming," Steele grunted. "About time." Angel steadied the cameras already pointed toward the road. Evelyn rose from her chair slowly, stretching out the stiffness in her joints. "Places, everyone," she said calmly. The squad moved like a machine. The first truck screeched to a halt in front of Evelyn's house. Men jumped out, their boots hitting the ground hard. One of them, a wiry figure with a bandana pulled over his mouth, shouted, "Drag her out here! Teach the old witch a lesson!" Roy swaggered forward, a baseball bat slung over one shoulder. He raised the bat and pointed it at Evelyn's porch. "Come on out, Granny," he bellowed. "Time to pay your damn dues." Inside, Jasmine clutched the edge of the window, fear written across her face. Steele gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Stay down, watch, learn." Evelyn stepped out onto the porch, no armor, no weapon, just a woman, old, small, calm, facing down a mob. Her medals caught the porch light, glittering like stars. The men hesitated. It was one thing to talk tough in a bar, another thing entirely to see the person you hated standing unbroken before you. Roy sneered to cover his doubt. "You think you're better than us?" he spat. "You think you can shame us?" Evelyn's voice was steady, clear. "I don't have to shame you," she said. "You've done that yourselves." The first bottle arced through the air, a glass Molotov sloppily, wrapped, burning at the mouth, but it never reached the porch. Steel, fast as a striking snake, stepped out from the shadows and caught it in a thick-gloved hand. With one smooth motion, he crushed the fire against the driveway, extinguishing it. Ghost stepped forward next, the drone buzzing overhead, red light blinking. Every second was being broadcast live, straight to 3 different secure servers. Straight to dozens of journalists, straight to the world. Angel zoomed her camera in tight, capturing the faces, the weapons, the rage. There would be no deniability. No he said, she said, only proof. Roy realized too late what was happening. He swung the bat once, a wild, angry arc. Steel caught it mid-swing, twisted it from Roy's grasp, and tossed it into the bushes. Ghost moved through the mob with surgical precision, disabling. Men with non-lethal force, a wrist lock here, a shove there, sending attackers sprawling onto the lawn. Angel circled behind the trucks, slashing tires with quick flicks of her knife. No escape, no retreat. Evelyn never moved. She stood on her porch, watching, judging, the old lion, roaring without making a sound. The scuffle was over in minutes. Half the attackers were on their knees, groaning. The other half had fled into the night, their bravado bleeding out with every panicked footstep. Steele leaned over Roy, who lay gasping in the dirt, face pale under the sickly moonlight. He spoke quietly. "You wanted a fight," Steele said. "You got on." Roy tried to scramble backward, but Steele just stood and let him crawl, let him run, let him live to face what came next. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Too little, too late. When the first squad car rolled up, the officers climbed out cautiously, hands near their belts. They saw Evelyn standing tall. They saw the battered men on the lawn. They saw the blinking red lights of cameras trained on their every move. The officers hesitated. They weren't used to being watched. Evelyn spoke first. "These men attacked my home," she said, voice calm and deadly. "We have everything on film, including your late arrival." She turned slightly, catching the camera's gaze. "And I'm sure the state police and federal agencies watching this feed will be very interested in your response." The lead officer's mouth opened, closed, opened again. He nodded stiffly. "We'll take statements," he mumbled. Angel caught it all on film. Steele smiled grimly. The noose tightened. Later, back inside the house, Evelyn poured herself a cup of tea. Jasmine wrapped a blanket tighter around her shoulders, her wide eyes still processing what she'd witnessed. Steele cleaned his knuckles absently. Ghost secured the footage. Angel sent another packet of evidence to their cloud archive. The battle had been small, a skirmish, but it had changed everything. McAllister Lane couldn't pretend anymore. The illusion was shattered, and the world was watching. Evelyn sat in her rocker again as dawn crept over the horizon. The air smelled different now, not fear, accountability. She closed her eyes and rocked slowly, smiling to herself. They had struck first. They had struck hard, and by morning, McAllister Lane was no longer a forgotten speck on the map. It was a headline. It was a trending hashtag. It was live footage looping across television screens and social media feeds nationwide. Veteran targeted in racist attack, town in turmoil. Elderly black war hero confronts hate and wins. Justice rolling into McAllister Lane. The whole country was watching now, and there was no turning back. Evelyn sipped her tea slowly as news vans lined the streets. Journalists huddled near the sidewalks, whispering urgently into microphones, their cameramen darting around like hungry wolves. Steele chuckled from the couch, feet propped up on the coffee table. Didn't even have to send invitations, he said. Ghost scrolled through his tablet, nodding with satisfaction. Coverage from CNN, BBC, even Al Jazeera. It's global. Angel flipped through printed screenshots of donations flooding into their newly set up legal defense fund. Hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands. Messages poured in, "We stand with you. You're not alone. Tell us how to help." Jasmine, sitting cross-legged on the floor, stared wide-eyed at it all. "I didn't think anyone would care," she whispered. Evelyn smiled gently. "They care when you make them look." At Rick's bar, Roy sat hunched at the counter, nursing a coffee laced with whiskey, his face pale and slack. Mason stormed in, slamming the door so hard it rattled the windows. "You said it would be easy," Mason hissed. Roy didn't answer. He couldn't. Every screen behind the bar replayed the footage. Roy's face clear as day, swinging a bat, his buddies sneering, shouting slurs. Evelyn standing firm, the cameras catching every second. The bartender muted the TV, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. Mason slammed his fist onto the counter. "The mayor's losing it. He's talking about cutting deals, saving his own skin." Roy finally lifted his head. His eyes were bloodshot, full of rage and fear. "We gotta stop it," he croaked. "Gotta find that woman. Shut her up. Shut them all up." Mason leaned closer, his voice low and urgent. "You don't get it. We're the ones being hunted now." At the town hall, Mayor Henderson mopped sweat from his brow as he screamed into his office phone. "I don't care what it costs," he bellowed. "Find a way to discredit her. Find something." His staffers exchanged nervous glances, but it was too late. Background checks, smear campaigns, all useless. Evelyn's record was clean, her reputation bulletproof. Every attempt to twist the story only made the town look guiltier. Every lie they tried to spin unraveled instantly under the searing spotlight of the media. McAllister Lane's dirty laundry, carefully hidden for generations, now flapped in the national breeze for all to see. At Evelyn's house, the squad strategized. "We push harder now," Angel said, spreading out a map of the town. "We leak more evidence, interviews, personal stories. Bring in witnesses." Steele nodded grimly. "We squeeze them. No breathing room." Ghost tapped on his laptop. "I'm prepping another drop. Names, faces, dates. Verified." Jasmine leaned forward, eyes fierce. "I want to tell my uncle's story." She said, "On camera." Evelyn nodded with quiet pride. "Good," she said. "The truth will do what fists never could." By midday, national reporters stood outside Evelyn's gate, pleading for statements. Evelyn stepped out onto the porch, flanked by Steele, Angel, Ghost, and Jasmine. The cameras clicked like a firing squad. Evelyn lifted her chin. "I did not survive battlefields abroad," she said, her voice carrying over the crowd, "to be silenced by cowards at home." The crowd fell silent. "I fought for a country that said it believed in freedom. Today, I fight again. Not for myself, but for every soul they've tried to break, every voice they've tried to silence." She looked straight into the camera lens. "We see you now, McAllister Lane. And so does the world." Thunderous applause broke from the gathered crowd. Some cried, some cheered, some simply stood silent, overwhelmed, and Evelyn turned, walked back into her house without another word. Mic drop. Inside Rick's bar, Roy watched it unfold on the muted TV. His hands shook. The walls around him seemed to close in, suffocating. "This ain't right," he muttered. "This ain't how it was supposed to go." Mason threw up his hands. "It's over, man. They're tearing it all down." "No," Roy whispered. "We can still fix it. We just gotta scare 'em, make 'em back off." Mason shook his head. "They're not scared of you anymore, Roy." The fractures deepened. Council members stopped taking Roy's calls. The police chief made a statement condemning recent acts of violence, pointedly omitting Roy's name, but everyone understood the message. The walls were falling, and in the center of it, All stood a 78-year-old black woman with a silver cane and a spine made of iron. Late that night, the squad gathered again. More stories had come in. An ex-deputy with a conscience ready to testify. A store clerk fired for refusing to overcharge black customers. An old teacher who kept hidden records of discriminatory expulsions. Steele leaned over the table, studying the lists. "This is a dam breaking," he said. Angel nodded. "And there's no patching it." Ghost loaded another batch of evidence onto encrypted drives. "It's gonna be messy," he said. "Real messy." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Good," she said. "Justice should be messy." In the quiet hours before dawn, Evelyn stood on her porch again, staring at the stars. She thought of the years she spent fighting overseas, of the years she spent fighting quietly at home, of the friends she'd lost along the way, of the promises she'd made, and she knew with bone-deep certainty they were winning. Not because they shouted the loudest, not because they swung the hardest, but because they endured, because they refused to be erased, because when hate came knocking, they answered not with fear, but with truth, the kind of truth that outlived bullets and broken promises, the kind of truth that even small towns couldn't bury forever. Evelyn closed her eyes and breathed in the humid, heavy air. Tomorrow would bring more chaos. Tomorrow, the real reckoning would begin, and she would be ready. Had failed. The cracks in McAllister Lane's foundations weren't just visible now. They were gaping. Everywhere Evelyn looked, the town was unraveling. Neighbors who once shared barbecues now crossed streets to avoid each other. Business owners whispered behind locked doors. Old alliances built on silence and bloodlines crumbled under the weight of exposure. Inside the courthouse, the town council gathered for an emergency session. Sweat beaded on foreheads. Tempers flared. Mayor Henderson slammed a stack of papers onto the mahogany table. "We're bleeding out," he roared. Councilman Wright, a man who prided himself on never raising his voice, pointed a trembling finger. "You told us you had this under control. You promised us." Henderson's face turned purple. "And I would have, if Roy hadn't gone and turned it into a damn national disaster." Everyone turned to look at Roy, seated at the far end of the table. His face pale and shiny with sweat. He said nothing. What could he say? The footage was clear. His guilt undeniable. He was radioactive now, and the others could smell it. Councilwoman Barrett slammed her briefcase shut. "I'm not going down for you," she snapped. "I'm cutting a deal." Wright stood too. "Me too. I'm getting immunity." "You can rot," Henderson pounded his fist on the table. "If one of you flips, we all go down." Barrett gave him a tight smile. "Not if we flip first." And just like that, the last shreds of loyalty that had bound the town's ruling class snapped clean in half. Outside the courthouse, Angel captured the commotion with a zoom lens from her parked car. She smiled grimly as the council members scattered. Like rats abandoning a sinking ship. "They're done," she said into her earpiece. "Eating each other alive?" Ghost's voice crackled back. "Good, keep pressure on, let 'em bleed." Steele chuckled from the driver's seat. "I love the smell of panic in the morning." Meanwhile, Evelyn met quietly with a group of townsfolk at her home. Jasmine sat by her side, notebook in hand. The group had grown. Former teachers, fired clerks, disenfranchised voters, disrespected veterans, all ready now. All awake, Evelyn spoke quietly, calmly. "This is not about revenge," she said. "This is about truth, about legacy, about making sure the next generation doesn't grow up thinking this rot is normal." She met each pair of eyes with unwavering resolve. "We move forward together," she said, "or not at all." They nodded, silent but fierce. The movement had become bigger than her. It had a life of its own now. By mid-afternoon, fresh chaos rocked the town. A leaked audio recording, captured months ago but buried deep, surfaced online. In it, Mayor Henderson was heard laughing with the police chief about how easy it was to keep the colored folks in line with bogus citations and scare tactics. The recording went viral within minutes. National news anchors played it on repeat. Civil rights organizations issued statements. Marches were planned. Lawyers circled like sharks. McAllister Lane was officially under siege, and no amount of spin could save it now. At Rick's bar, Roy watched it all unfold on a cracked television. His hands shook so badly he spilled his drink. Nobody sat near him. The regulars who once laughed at his jokes now gave him a wide berth, afraid to be seen siding with the sinking man. Mason approached cautiously. "You need to run," he muttered. "Get out of town." Roy's laugh was broken, hollow. "Run where?" he asked. "Ain't nowhere left to hide." And he was right. That night, the streets of McAllister Lane pulsed with unease. The movement had grown, not just online, but in flesh and blood. Families gathered on porches, holding signs. Children chalked messages of hope onto sidewalks. Old veterans, black and white, stood shoulder to shoulder outside City Hall. Justice, accountability, change. The words weren't just slogans, they were battle cries, and Evelyn Carter stood at the heart of it all. The eye of the storm, her silver hair glowing under the streetlights. Steele kept watch from a rooftop nearby, scanning for threats. Ghost worked double shifts, monitoring feeds and police scanners. Angel coordinated media releases, making sure every new revelation hit at just the right moment, maximizing damage. They weren't just reacting anymore, they were directing the battlefield. At midnight, Evelyn sat quietly in her living room, the weight of the day pressing against her chest. Jasmine dozed nearby, clutching her notebook. Steele snored softly in a chair. Ghost muttered into a headset. Angel typed furiously, fingers flying. Evelyn watched them all with a quiet ache in her heart. They had given up everything to be here for her, for the town, for the truth. She bowed her head and whispered a prayer into the heavy air. Let it matter. Let it last. But even as they celebrated small victories, Evelyn knew desperation made dangerous men reckless, and the enemy had nothing left to lose. The real fight, the ugly fight, was coming, and it would test them all in ways they weren't ready for. At the edge of town, in a dimly lit motel room, Roy Tucker sat alone, clutching a bottle. On the battered bed beside him lay a handgun. He stared at it for a long time. Outside, a dog barked once, then fell silent. Roy closed his eyes. Tomorrow, everything would change, one way or another. The morning after the leaked recording, McAllister Lane woke up a battlefield. The town's soul, once stitched together, with polite lies and shared silences, had split open, raw and bleeding. Sides were chosen in the open now. There was no middle ground left. At the diner, a hand-lettered sign hung crookedly in the window. No troublemakers. Locals only. Inside, the usual breakfast chatter was replaced with hissing arguments. "You think she's some kind of hero?" barked an old man hunched over black coffee. "She's bringing ruin down on all of us." A young waitress, no more than 19, slammed a plate down so hard the egg slid onto the counter. "Maybe if you hadn't been ruining it for everyone else all these years," she snapped, "there wouldn't be anything to expose." Heads turned, mouths hung open. The waitress ripped off her apron and stormed out. Across town, similar fractures appeared like spiderweb cracks in glass. On Evelyn's porch, the movement grew louder. Dozens of people now gathered daily, some carrying signs, others simply standing in silent solidarity. Evelyn sat in her rocker, her cane across her knees, greeting each newcomer with a nod or a small smile. Steele worked security, watching faces, noting cars that circled too often, marking threats. Ghost managed communication feeds, coordinating with journalists, civil rights attorneys, community organizers. Angel kept the evidence flowing, each new piece tightening the noose around McAllister Lane's crumbling leadership. And Jasmine, sweet, fierce Jasmine, ran messages between groups, helping organize food, water, places for tired protesters to rest. They had built an ecosystem of resistance, a living, breathing testament to a town refusing to stay broken. But not everyone cheered. Late morning, a battered blue sedan crawled past the house, slowing almost to a stop. The driver, a heavy-set man in a trucker cap, spat out the window, his voice dripping venom. "Hope you burn in hell, witch." Steele stepped off the porch before the last word finished, his mere presence sending the car squealing away. Angel filmed it all. Silent witness. They didn't need to retaliate, they only needed the truth. Inside City Hall, panic boiled. Councilman Wright had officially turned. He signed an immunity deal with federal investigators and publicly denounced the mayor and Roy Tucker. He held a press conference, small, grim, but devastating. "I can no longer, in good conscience, be part of a system built on hate and fear," he read from a prepared statement. It didn't absolve him. It didn't save his reputation. But it set a fire McAllister Lane couldn't extinguish. Mayor Henderson lost control completely. When a CNN reporter tried to ask him about the leaked recordings, Henderson shoved the microphone away and stormed back inside City Hall, cursing loudly enough for it to be caught on live TV. The headlines the next morning were brutal. Small-town mayor implodes under racism scandal. Justice rolling in, and McAllister Lane can't stop it. But as the movement surged forward, Evelyn's squad faced an unexpected betrayal. At sunset, as Evelyn and Jasmine organized a vigil for the town's victims, Ghost received an encrypted message on his laptop. Steele and Angel crowded around as he read it aloud. "It's from a contact inside the sheriff's office," Ghost said grimly. "They're planning a midnight raid." Angel frowned. "On who?" Ghost's mouth tightened. "On us." The plan was simple and dirty. Fabricate a weapons charge, seize computers, phones, evidence, discredit Evelyn's group before the state and federal. Investigators could finish their work. Without hard proof, the story would fall apart. The town would survive. The rot would endure. Evelyn closed her eyes, breathing slowly. She had fought wars in deserts and jungles. She had faced enemy fire and bureaucratic knives. But this betrayal, from the very system sworn to protect, it cut deeper. She opened her eyes, calm and fierce. "We're not going to fight them in the dark," she said. "We're going to fight them in the light." The squad moved into action. Steele organized the evacuation. Equipment, files, hard drives, all smuggled out and hidden across sympathetic homes. Angel contacted media allies, arranging live coverage at Evelyn's house through the night. Ghost backed up every bite of evidence onto international servers. By 11:30 p.m., Evelyn's house was wired with cameras streaming live to tens of thousands. Any move the authorities made would be recorded, exposed, judged. Evelyn sat calmly in her chair, medals pinned, gaze steady as a sniper's. She was ready. Whatever came through the darkness, she would not yield. At 12:07 a.m., the sheriff's trucks rolled up, lights flashing, radios crackling, boots stomping. A dozen deputies in tactical gear stormed toward the porch. Cameras caught every second. Steele stood in front, arms crossed, silent and unmovable. Ghost live-streamed the deputies' every step, every shouted order, every nervous twitch. Angel's cameras rolled from every angle. The deputies faltered under the blinding glare of the lights and lenses. Their bluff exposed, they stumbled through a half-hearted speech about safety checks and community concerns. It was pitiful, it was obvious. It was broadcast in real time to a furious nation. Within hours, national civil rights attorneys descended. Federal agents launched formal inquiries. The sheriff's office faced immediate suspension orders. The raid that was meant to silence Evelyn had instead catapulted her into legend. As the deputies slunk away, defeated, Evelyn rose slowly from her chair. She walked to the porch rail. Looking out over the sea of cameras, supporters, and streaming lights, she lifted her chin and spoke, her voice steady, cutting the heavy night air. "You cannot kill the truth with fear." The crowd roared, and McAllister Lane shook under the weight of history being written in real time. Morning broke heavy over McAllister Lane. The sun burned through the mist like a blade, harsh and unrelenting, and with the dawn came justice. Federal vehicles rolled into town in silent columns, black SUVs, marked agency sedans, sharp-eyed agents in dark suits. There were no sirens, no flashing lights. Just a quiet, methodical dismantling of the town's corrupt machinery. Arrest after arrest unfolded across the sleepy streets. Mayor Henderson, still red-faced and blustering, was led away in handcuffs from City Hall, shouting about conspiracies. No one cared to listen to. Councilwoman Barrett was pulled from her home in a pristine bathrobe, her mascara smearing as she cursed at reporters. Sheriff Dalton, pale and shaking, surrendered at the courthouse steps under the blank gaze of his own deputies. Even Roy Tucker, the man who once thought he owned the town, was dragged from a cheap motel room on the outskirts, hollow-eyed and broken. The town watched, stunned. Some cheered openly, some wept, some simply stood frozen, clutching each other's hands, not daring to believe it was real. At Evelyn's house, the atmosphere was solemn. Steele leaned against the porch railing, arms folded across his chest, watching the arrests unfold. On a portable TV, Ghost sat cross-legged on the floor, organizing backup files, securing every piece of evidence. Angel, exhausted but resolute, worked the media channels, ensuring every second was recorded, archived, immortalized. And Evelyn simply sat in her rocking chair, her cane resting across her lap. Her face was carved from stone. Victories, she knew, never came without scars. By noon, the town's hierarchy had collapsed entirely. State officials moved in, setting up emergency management teams. Civil rights lawyers established field offices in abandoned storefronts. Volunteer organizers flooded in from nearby cities, offering aid, rebuilding plans, and hope. The old regime was gone, but the work of healing, of rebuilding trust and dignity, had only just begun. That afternoon, Evelyn called a gathering. The porch groaned under the weight of history as dozens, then hundreds, of people filled the yard, the street, the sidewalks. Beyond, journalists lined the periphery, cameras trained and waiting, children perched on shoulders, veterans stood at rigid attention, teachers, parents, shopkeepers, all standing in the searing heat waiting for her. Evelyn rose slowly. Steele and Ghost moved instinctively to steady her, but she waved them off with a soft smile. She stepped forward, her medals catching the sun's blaze. She didn't need a microphone, her voice carried all on its own. "Justice is not a moment," she said. "It's a life's work." The crowd leaned in, hanging on every syllable. "Justice is not something you inherit. It is something you fight for, every day, in every small corner where cruelty thinks it can hide." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. "We didn't win today because we were louder," Evelyn said. "We won because we stood, when it was hard, when it was dangerous, when we were tired." Her gaze swept the faces before her, young and old, weary and defiant. "We will rebuild this town. Not with anger, not with revenge, but with courage, with truth, with hope." She paused, letting the words settle. "And we will never," she said fiercely, "ever forget who we are." The roar that followed shook the broken sidewalks. Tears streamed down faces, hands clutched hearts, and somewhere, deep in the marrow of McAllister Lane, something new took root, something strong, something righteous, something unstoppable. Later, after the crowd had dispersed and the journalists packed up their vans, Evelyn sat on her porch, alone, except for the quiet hum of cicadas. Steele approached. Holding 2 mugs of strong black coffee, he handed one to Evelyn, who took it with a grateful nod. They sat in silence for a long while, the golden dusk settling over them like a blanket. Finally, Steele spoke. "You did it, Evie," he said quietly. Evelyn smiled faintly. "No," she said. "We did it." She looked out over the town, still battered, still bleeding, but alive, awake, changed. "They tried to bury us," she said, voice low. Steele grunted. "They forgot we're seeds." Inside the house, Ghost finished encrypting the final wave of evidence. He leaned back in his chair, exhaustion dragging at his limbs, and allowed himself a rare smile. Angel sat nearby, phone pressed to her ear, coordinating the next steps, rebuilding accountability committees, memorials for the forgotten victims. Jasmine, the fierce heart of the new generation, sorted files, organized testimonies, mapped out plans for town halls and reparations. The work would never be finished, but that was the point. As night crept in, Evelyn rose once more. She walked slowly into the middle of the street, alone, silent. She tilted her head back, staring up at the stars pricking the velvet sky. So many battles behind her, so many still ahead, but for the first time in a long time, she felt the ground beneath her feet steady. She whispered into the dark, "For all of them, for all of us." The wind carried her words away, up into the vast, forgiving night. And McAllister. Lane, battered, bruised, broken, began slowly, painfully to heal. Victory has a weight to it. Not the soaring, triumphant rush the movies show, not the parades, the speeches, the neat endings. No. Real victory feels heavy. It sits in your chest like a stone, sharp-edged, unmovable, reminding you every second what it cost. The first few days after the arrests, McAllister Lane buzzed. With energy, volunteers cleared trash from abandoned lots. Artists painted murals over graffiti-stained walls. Children laughed freely in streets once too tense to play in. It was beautiful. It was hard, because under the new paint, the wounds still bled. Evelyn walked through town slowly, her cane tapping a steady rhythm on the hot asphalt. Steele trailed a few steps behind, watchful but relaxed now. Angel organized town meetings, bringing in civil rights leaders, rebuilding trust brick by brick. Ghost worked security logistics, making sure bad actors couldn't slip back into power unnoticed. Jasmine spoke at schools, telling her story, reminding the next generation why they must never fall asleep again. But not everyone embraced the new dawn. In quiet corners, resentment festered. Former council supporters grumbled about outsiders stirring up trouble. Old-timers muttered about how things used to be. Shame curdled into anger. Guilt twisted into blame. At the local grocery store, Evelyn reached for a loaf of bread when a woman, hair dyed an angry shade of red, arms crossed tightly over her chest, sneered loudly enough for the entire aisle to hear. "Hope you're proud of yourself, tearing this town apart." Evelyn met her gaze calmly. "Telling the truth doesn't tear towns apart," she said. "Lies do." The woman huffed, turned on her heel and stormed away. Steele smirked as he tossed a jar of peanut butter into the basket. "Still standing, Evie?" "Always," Evelyn said quietly, but the exchange lingered like smoke in her lungs. Late that night, Evelyn sat on her porch, staring at the battered American flag fluttering from a nearby pole. Steele, Ghost, Angel, and Jasmine sat with her. An unspoken ritual now. They didn't talk much these days. They didn't need to. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of battles survived, of promises kept, of family forged in fire. Finally, Ghost broke the stillness. "Some folks'll never forgive us for waking 'em up," he said, voice rough. Steele grunted in agreement. They liked their nightmares. "Better." Angel leaned back, gazing up at the stars. "Change hurts," she said, "and some people would rather hurt than heal." Evelyn sipped her tea, savoring the bitter warmth. "They'll catch up," she said softly. "Or they won't." She set the mug down and laced her fingers together. "But we'll keep building anyway." The next morning, Evelyn attended the first new town council meeting. The room, once heavy with entitlement and disdain, now hummed with a different energy. Diverse faces filled the seats, young, old, black, white, Latino, native. Voices rose, argued, debated, not about who belonged, but about how best to rebuild. It was messy. It was passionate. It was democracy, raw and real. During public comment, Jasmine stood. Her voice was clear, unwavering. "We can't just paint murals and plant gardens," she said. "We have to fix the schools, the housing, the courts. We have to undo the damage done, even if it's slow, even if it's painful." The room buzzed with murmurs of agreement. Jasmine stepped down, cheeks flushed, eyes shining. Evelyn caught her gaze across the room and nodded once. Pride welled up inside. Her, fierce and aching. Outside, a reporter caught Evelyn for a quick question. "Miss Carter," she said breathlessly, shoving a microphone forward. "What's next for you?" Evelyn smiled, small, tired, real. "We keep working," she said simply. "We build a town worthy of its children." The reporter blinked, surprised by the simplicity, but Evelyn was already moving on, her cane tapping, her steps sure. At the community center, volunteers unpacked supplies for a free health clinic. At the old library, teenagers repainted walls and restocked shelves with donated books. At the park, mothers and fathers hammered together new playground equipment. The town pulsed with renewal. Not easy, not perfect, but real. Later that evening, Jasmine found Evelyn on the porch again, staring. "Out at the horizon, can I sit?" she asked. Evelyn nodded. They sat side by side for a while, listening to the cicadas sing. Finally, Jasmine spoke. "Do you ever get tired?" she asked softly. "Of fighting?" Evelyn chuckled, low and warm. "Every damn day." Jasmine laughed too, blinking back sudden tears. "But you don't stop," she said. Evelyn's voice was quiet but iron strong. "No, child. Because the day we stop, they win." Jasmine nodded, understanding settling into her bones. As darkness swallowed McAllister Lane, Evelyn closed her eyes and let the sounds of a town finding its way home wash over her. Laughter, hammering, music, drifting from open windows. Signs of life, signs of hope. Victory had cost them dearly, but it had meant something, and that made every scar worth it. Far down the road, in towns not so different from McAllister Lane, whispers began to stir. If they could change, maybe we can too. Maybe the fight wasn't hopeless after all. Maybe truth was heavier and stronger than fear. Maybe the seeds planted here would bloom far beyond these broken streets. And Evelyn Carter, soldier, survivor, stormbringer, sat quietly in her rocking chair, knowing the battle never truly ended. But for tonight, for this sliver of history they had carved out with blood, sweat, and unbreakable will, she would let herself breathe. She would let herself believe. Tomorrow will bring new fights, new betrayals, new reckonings. But for now, they had won, and that was enough. Weeks passed. The scars of McAllister Lane remained, burned into cracked sidewalks, abandoned storefronts, and broken hearts. But alongside them, something else grew. Hope. Real, stubborn, defiant hope. The new town council met weekly now, hammering out ordinances designed to protect civil rights, rebuild housing, fund education. The old police force was disbanded and rebuilt from scratch, with oversight committees ensuring transparency. Black-owned businesses opened their doors in spaces once barred to them. Minority teachers filled classrooms. Public murals celebrated diversity, resilience, and unity. The road was still hard, arguments still flared, old wounds still ached. But McAllister Lane had learned something vital. Truth makes rebuilding possible, Evelyn. Carter moved through it all like a ghost and a general, ever present, ever watching, ever guiding. She didn't need to lead marches anymore. She didn't need to stand at podiums. Her presence alone reminded everyone what had been lost and what had been won. One afternoon, Jasmine found Evelyn tending to a small community garden planted on the old courthouse lawn. The garden bloomed. Wild, sunflowers, roses, marigolds, bursting in chaotic, beautiful defiance of the manicured order the old regime once demanded. Jasmine knelt beside Evelyn, pulling weeds. They worked in silence until Jasmine spoke. "You ever think about leaving?" she asked. Evelyn smiled, slow and knowing. "Every day," she said, "and every day I choose to stay." Jasmine nodded. She understood now. McAllister Lane was hers, flaws, fights and all. You didn't leave family behind. You stayed. You fought. You built. That evening the town held a celebration at the new community center. Music filled the air, jazz, gospel, blues, voices raised in song, bodies moving in joy. Children played tag across the grass. Elders sat in folding chairs, sharing stories of how it used to be, and how it must never be again. Steel, Angel and Ghost stood together near the back, drinks in hand, watching over it all like proud guardians. Jasmine stood at the front, her voice bright and steady as she spoke into a microphone. She told the crowd about her uncle, about Evelyn, about the fight, about the future. Evelyn sat quietly at the edge of the crowd, smiling softly. She didn't need the spotlight. She had never fought for fame. She fought for this, for children laughing without fear, for teachers teaching without bias, for families walking streets that no longer whispered threats, for possibility. As the sun dipped low and painted the sky in bruised gold and violet, Jasmine called Evelyn forward. The crowd turned, parting like water. Evelyn rose slowly, her body old but her spirit unbreakable. She walked through them, a living monument, a reminder, a promise kept. Jasmine handed her a plaque, simple, unadorned. It read, Evelyn Carter Community Center, dedicated to courage, truth and legacy. The crowd erupted in applause, a rising, roaring wave of gratitude. Evelyn touched the plaque, tracing the engraved letters with trembling fingers. She lifted her head, and for a moment, just a moment, the weight lifted. The years of battle, the friends lost, the betrayals endured, the victories earned. It all burned away under the light of what they had built, what would outlast her. She took the microphone, her voice low but carrying across the field. "I am not the beginning," she said, "and I am not the end." She looked out over them, over Jasmine's fierce smile, Steele's proud stance, Angel's bright eyes, Ghost's quiet strength. "I am just a link," she said, "in a chain that stretches back beyond memory and forward beyond sight." The crowd held its breath. "You are the future," Evelyn said, "and you are the proof that we do not fight in vain." Tears blurred Jasmine's eyes. Ghost bowed his head. Steele crossed his arms tighter, holding emotion in his massive chest. Angel wiped her cheek quickly. Evelyn stepped back, her hand steady. As she placed the plaque in Jasmine's hands, "Your turn now," she said softly, and Jasmine understood. The fight never ended. It simply passed hands, from the old warriors to the young builders. Later, as dusk deepened into full night, Evelyn sat on her porch one last time. The house creaked familiarly beneath her. The cicadas droned their endless song. The stars blinked slowly awake. She closed her eyes, breathing in the heavy, sweet air. She remembered it all, the pain, the fear, the small victories, the great losses, and she smiled, because even if tomorrow brought new battles, even if new darkness rose, they would not be unarmed. They had truth, they had memory, they had each other. In the distance, a group of teenagers laughed, skateboards clattering against pavement. Their freedom rang louder than any speech. Their joy was the anthem of a town reborn. Evelyn Carter soldier of 2 wars, fighter for countless others, leaned back in her chair and let the night carry her home, not in defeat, not in sorrow, but in peace, knowing she had kept the promise whispered over battlefields and broken sidewalks alike. No one left behind. Not this time, not ever again.